_ sports editor at Independent News.
And I'm Melvina Sykes. I'm the Office of Quality Enhancement Plan Communications Intern.
And today we will be interviewing Alejandro Danois, who is the editor-in-chief of the Shadow League and a freelance sports and entertainment writer, whose work has been published by the New York Times, the Baltimore Sun, Associated Press, Bleacher Report, Sporting News, Los Angeles Times, and Ebony Magazine, among others.
His first book, The Boys of Dunbar, A Story of Love, Hope, and Basketball, was released in 2016 and is one of the spotlights in the 2017 Savannah Book Festival. Alejandro Danois tells an encouraging true story of high school basketball team that gave a city hope, overcoming desperate circumstances in 1980s Baltimore, and producing 4 NBA players. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Kelvin.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm honored and privileged to be here. Thanks, guys. You guys made my day.
Okay, so my first question is, what is your academic background and how long have you been a writer?
Well, I think I've been a writer my entire life. I had a girlfriend in high school tell me that I was a writer and didn't realize it. And when I was in college at the University of Pennsylvania, I thought I was going to become an investment banker and become a millionaire by the age of 25 on Wall Street. And I had one of my English professors say, I don't know what they're doing with you at that business school, but you need to be here with us in the English department because you're a writer. Professionally, about 16 years I've been writing. But even before I got paid to write, I would write short stories, or I was always interested in the written word. To me, I learned early on when I was a kid that reading books just opened up these magical worlds to me. I felt like I could communicate across time and space with some of the greatest minds ever in history. So I always had this intimate relationship and love for books and the written word, and also for sports. And eventually, when I said, you know, I love sports, I love writing, I'm going to put those two together and follow my passions, that's kind of when things took off in terms of me really wanting to pursue my interest as a journalist and a writer.
Okay. And also, you are the editor-in-chief of the Shadow League. Could you tell us a little bit about this magazine, your main responsibilities there?
Okay. Well, the Shadow League is a sports and entertainment internet property. So folks can go to theshadowleague.com and check it out. And Shadow League was actually started by media entrepreneur Keith Clinkscales, who started Vibe magazine when he was very young with Quincy Jones back in the 90s. Keith has done some really fantastic work in the social media entrepreneur space. He went on to become the highest ranking African American executive at ESPN. From there he became the CEO of Puffy, Puff Daddy, P. Diddy, I don't know what you guys call it. His Revolt TV platform, Keith was the CEO there, and he also started the Shadow League, which is an internet property. The majority of the writing we do is around sports, but we also do a lot of entertainment stuff, and it's culture, it's society. We do long-form storytelling. We do commentaries on things that are our interests of us to people of color, but it's not just something that's for African Americans. I mean, it's about sports, it's about entertainment, it's about society, it's about kind of a lot of different pieces coming together. So we're not so much interested in the final score, right? As much as I love LeBron, I don't want to write that LeBron had 50 points, 10 rebounds, and 16 assists. I want to enjoy that as a fan. But if I'm writing about LeBron, I want to write about the desperate circumstances he grew up in Akron. I want to talk about the role that his grandmother played. You know, I want to talk about the struggles that his mom went through. I want to talk about how sports was such a galvanizing force in his life and the brotherhood of those experiences with the teammates he played with, how that helped propel him to a mental space for him to be able to formulate this amazing life vision for himself. So that's what the Shadow League is really about. It's not about the final score, it's not about who won, it's about perspective, it's about intelligence, it's about humor. And sports, as we know, touches on so many different segments of society. So we want to write something that makes people think. We want to write something that makes people really kind of look at themselves and look at the overall world we live in using sports and entertainment kind of as a jump off point to really talk about some issues that are serious, but we do it in a way that's intellectual, and it's also humorous, and we have a great time. So check it out, theshadowleague.com.
Okay. So you are also a freelance writer and have published work in the New York Times, Los Angeles Times, and Ebony. What is your favorite genre of writing? Is it sports, entertainment, or do you just love it all? How is life as a freelance writer?
Sports is definitely my favorite. I mean, I grew up as a young person really fascinated with sports because it provided an outlet for me to get beyond some circumstances that were pretty challenging as a young person. So I initially started playing organized sports and realized that the lessons that I learned, the mentors that I had, the structure that it gave me, working towards goals with teammates and trying to work with one another to achieve excellence, those things kind of stayed with me. And so sports have always been, to me, more important than, as we discussed earlier, just who won the game and the final score. I can sit here right now and try to recollect my high school basketball career, my high school football career. I can't tell you how many touchdowns I scored. I can't tell you how many points I averaged or how many assists. I can remember certain games where I had really good games, but I can remember the bus rides, the jokes. I can remember the bonds. I can call up one of my old buddies now who is doing some work around the athletic shoe business, and he's in China, and we can grab 10 minutes on the phone, and it's like we never separated, even if I hadn't talked to him in 10 years, So sports was always the foundation for me to think about other things and bigger things. And so sports, I think, gives me the opportunity to tell so many different types of stories. I also like the entertainment realm. I was telling Dan, my host for the weekend, that I prefer to work in the candy store of journalism, which is sports and entertainment. But again, there are so many fascinating things that the tentacles of sports and entertainment reach out to, whether it be business and commerce. If we're going to talk about LeBron, we need to talk about the business of LeBron. LeBron has the opportunity to be the first active billionaire athlete in professional sports through his marketing deals, through his ownership, through being a commercial pitchman, through having his own representation agency where he's actually an agent for other people's in the league. He's going into uncharted territory that we've never seen before. The same can be said for the greatest athlete of our generation and perhaps the greatest athlete of all time in Serena Williams, right? So it's beyond their excellence on the field and on the court. It's really studying the business of LeBron, the business of Serena. And then we can look at some other people like O.J. Simpson, who had possibly the greatest downfall of any one of America's most celebrated athletes. And we get into crime, we get into law and order. We get into so many different elements that, to me, that's what sports writing is all about. Don't send me to the game to write a game story. And I have the ultimate respect for those guys that do that, and they're passionate about it. If I'm at the game and I'm working, I want it to be part of a larger narrative. And quite honestly, I don't really want to work at the game. I want to get my chicken tenders. I want to get my soda. I want to be chilling with my girls. I want to cheer for John Wall and Carmelo and have a good time. But I want to tell stories that matter, that make a difference, that make people laugh and make people cry. And sports is my preferred area to do that. You also asked about life as a freelancer.
Yes.
For people that have an interest in writing and maybe have illusions, or maybe we should call them delusions, of grandeur about freelance work, it's a very difficult way to make a living. And then when I began starting as a freelance writer, had to have a full-time job. So, work your full-time job, come home and chase your passion, and work at night, work on the weekends to really kind of hone the craft. But it's a difficult business because you have to be able to deal with rejection. James Patterson was the featured speaker at the opening event last night for the Savannah Film Festival, and he talked about his first, I believe, book proposal that he sent, and it was rejected by 31 publishers. And so now we have this man who's sold over 318 million books, I believe, and he got his start having to deal with failure and rejection. And that's how it is as a freelancer. I mean, a lot of times you will send this story idea, and you won't even hear back from someone to say, thanks for submitting, but no, we're not really interested. And you hear no a lot. And so my advice to people is you have to be able to deal with that. You have to be able to say, someone's rejection of my story idea is not a reflection of me or my idea. It's a reflection of their short-sightedness. Because if you really believe in something and you're passionate about it and you put in the work to make it happen, you're going to deliver something that ultimately somebody's going to read and be impacted and touched by. So you have to be able to deal with that and understand, the kind of the classic line, when you're going through a breakup in a relationship is, it's not you, it's me. Yeah. Well, when you're dealing with publishers that are rejecting your story ideas, it's not me, it's them. And you just got to plug away. You have to have a faith. It doesn't pay well in the beginning while you're trying to establish yourself. And it can be really, really tough to navigate those waters. But if you are sincere and you're passionate and you're not going to let anything get in your way, you'll find a way to help build your portfolio, build your resume, and be able to get a break. And you'll be ready for it and you'll be prepared for it.
Okay, The Boys of Dunbar, A Story of Love, Hope, and Basketball is your first book. When and why did you decide to write a book? Why was it so important for you to tell the story of the Dunbar poet? Just to clarify to our audience, the Dunbar Poets is the name of the basketball team.
Okay, so The Boys of Dunbar, A Story of Love, Hope, and Basketball was a 10-year passion project for me. From the initial process of formulating the idea to the book actually hitting bookshelves was 10 years. 10 years worth of work, blood, sweat, tears. And so what's interesting is that I grew up loving books, as I mentioned earlier. I was a kid who, while other guys in my neighborhood were getting in trouble, if I wasn't playing sports, I was going to the local library because that's where I found these escapes into these stories of these men that I admired and looked up to, whether it be Muhammad Ali, who was my stylistic role model. Great NBA players, college basketball players, college football players, whoever they were, their stories spoke to me. So I read books on every athlete I could get a hold of. And, it was interesting when I was younger. I said, man, I'd love to write a book one day. But I didn't start out saying, I'm going to write a book about the greatest high school basketball team of all time. And we talked earlier about being a freelancer and kind of working and sending out story ideas and just kind of building your skill set and being prepared when the break comes. I sent this story idea to a major magazine editor. It was a 3-paragraph pitch, and I said, I want to write this story for your magazine on perhaps the greatest high school basketball team of all time, and these were the key figures, and I think it's really fascinating. And so in his prescient wisdom, he got back to me and said, man, this is a great idea, but we're not going to do anything with it. And so I said, well, why, if you think it's a good idea? And he said, well, because I think you have something bigger here. I think this is much bigger than a 1,000-word magazine story. I think you actually have a book idea here. And so we talk about serendipity, putting in the work, being prepared, being at that time and space where the door opens for you because you've put in the work. And luckily, this guy took an interest in me. He called a major literary agency and said, hey, you guys should get in touch with this kid Alejandro because he's got some talent and he's got this wonderful idea. And I got a phone call out of the blue from a major literary agent in New York and said, hey, we talked to this guy at the magazine. He speaks very highly of you. He sent us your 3-paragraph magazine pitch. Are you up for turning that into an 80-page book proposal? And I said, let's do it, And so a lot of hard work went into that, and a lot of research and kind of getting everything together and figuring out how this story was going to go, because I'm accustomed to writing newspaper and magazine stories. I'm not used to writing books. And so now I have to work and figure out this process and how it works. And so it really was serendipitous. And then once I could see the vision and once I could see the pieces in place for me to make the dream become a reality, I went at it with everything I had. And, just they say that the million-mile journey starts with the first step. And having the thought and the belief that, okay, I got to get started. I'm not going to do anything by standing still. So took those first steps, had some people around me that helped guide me, and I was very, very fortunate that it was well received, that I worked with some fantastic people, and that now to see the finished product, that people who read it are really excited about it, it's pretty cool.